with recording. So
Okay, so this is the round table on period cheesemaking. Since it's a round table, I would like group participation as much as the group wants to participate. So first off, well, those of you who don't have your video on, raising your hand won't work so well. How many of you make cheese? As opposed to those who want to make cheese and haven't done it yet. Okay, so we got
cheese adjacent to Lucia.
Okay, so you make cheese. We got somebody, Mariana says she cheeses too. Okay. Usually I do this as a class on period cheese making, but since we're doing a round table, I want group participation. Does those of you who make cheese, do you have access to raw milk? Because obviously all period cheeses were made with raw milk. Because Louis Pasteur was not a glint in his grandfather's eye yet. So, oh, Penn, you don't have access to raw milk. Raw milk, for those of you who've done both raw and pasteurized, raw behaves differently. It is so much easier to make cheese with because it just turns into cheese if you leave it alone. It's amazing. Well, okay,
it is not legal to purchase raw milk where I live. People have been prosecuted for it.
Oh, that's no fun at all. Why are people muted? It's a group discussion. People should not be muted.
Habit.
I know, habit. Everybody, it's their Zoom. It's their Zoom etiquette. I get that.
I'm so excited though. I just discovered that the market that I almost never go to up the hill because I go to the other market in the other direction carries raw Guernsey milk.
Ooh, yummy.
we can get Guernsey, but it has to be pasteurized, but it's at least not homogenized. So it's like we're getting closer.
You're getting cream top. That's good. Yeah, that's what I generally use is cream top. Only because raw milk is so much more expensive. But I do like
I apologize. I own 12 dogs. That's why I'm going to be muted.
That is a very valid.
That's a good reason. That's a very good reason. There for a while we could get sheep milk here in the Bay Area, but the sheep milk dairy went out of business, unfortunately. We can still get sheep yogurt and stuff like that, but not actual sheep milk.
We can get milk, but it's again still pasteurized
and very expensive.
Yeah, the sheep milk was expensive and pasteurized. There's water buffalo milk locally, and of course goat, because goat's easy to get. Goat both pasteurized and raw. But yeah, the water buffalo was a fun find.
I know of a water buffalo cheese vendor at our farmers market. I wonder if they would sell us milk.
You can ask.
Worth asking.
Yeah. I know that Maeve has made tons and tons and tons of cheese.
So the chat is asking how raw milk acts differently.
Oh, okay. If you have pasteurized milk and you leave it out on the counter instead of putting in the fridge, you will get garbage. If you leave raw milk out of the refrigerator on the counter, you will get curds and whey, and you just have to strain it and you have your curds, salt them, press them, cheese. Yay. Because since it's raw, the little happy microbes that live in the milk are not killed by the pasteurization process. So as long as your raw milk source is clean, there are not bad microbes, there are only good microbes in there. It will do that, because how would people have figured if milk didn't just become cheese by these miraculous little microbes? How would people in period have figured it out? I mean, when it just happens, that's that's how people figured it out, because milk, fresh milk will, if you don't drink it up, you need to do something with it. And the doing something with it was, it became curds and whey. Oh, I wonder if I can still eat this. Let's separate it out because the liquid part is too heavy and I'm traveling. Oh, let's press it. Oh, this is yummy. Let's just have it. So yeah, that's how they must have figured it out, because it just automatically just happens. Just like cow's milk, not goat or sheep. Goat and sheep don't separate, but cows will separate, and that's how you can figure out, oh, there's cream and then there's this other stuff. Again, not when it's not homogenized. It's cheesemakers in period did not know a lot of the things that modern people have thermometers, so they can measure temperatures. Modern cheesemakers get little packets of cultures from the cheesemaking supplier. Period cheesemakers didn't know that. They didn't know about microbes. They didn't know about, little teeny critters that make happy dances in your milk and make cheese. So there's a lot of things that we as modern people take for granted that period cheesemakers didn't. So switching around your mindset to, well, how did they know this? How did they make that work? I know why this works, but how did they know that? I find that an interesting thing to try and figure out, and to figure out their methods. I don't know if any of the others of you have contemplated stuff about that, and when you read period cheesemaking instructions, they're not necessarily recipes, but there's several instructions on the cheesemaking, and it doesn't talk about temperatures. It doesn't talk about adding little freezer microbes. It talks about just the process, and that it just works. And there are some period cheeses, like there is a 16th century Chinese recipe for cheese. Now, this is very unusual because you don't think about dairying cultures in China. And that recipe only works with raw milk. I've tried it both ways, and pasteurized milk just does not work.
What did that come out like? I'm curious, having cooked Chinese recipes from period that called for cheese, and I used my best estimation based on some things I'd read at the time. But since you've actually played with making it,
it's kind of like string cheese, actually. Both, because it's not an aged cheese, and just the texture, it's kind of stringy, like string cheese. So that's what I would use for a substitute if you were to make those. It's a round table. More people should be talking.
So I don't even know where to start looking for period cheese like directions, or I know you say they're not recipes, but like where do I find such nuggets of awesome?
Okay, like everything else in the universe, there are several Facebook groups for SCA cheesemakers. There's the Known World Cheesemaker group, there's the Lockdock Cheesemaker group, there's the West Kingdom Cheesemakers group. There's in terms of books on the history of cheesemaking, there is Paul Kinstead's marvelous book.
Oh yeah, I don't remember.
Culture, is it Cheese and Culture, whatever it's called. Somebody, Maeve, look it up for me. You know which one I mean, right? Okay, Maeve will look it up, so we'll get the specific. And for those of you who live in places where it is legal to have raw milk, David Asher's Art of Natural Cheesemaking, or Natural Cheesemaking Art, something like that, it's a book all about raw milk cheesemaking, and it's really good. It doesn't deal with the history, but the procedures. Yes, Eden has it. That's right. Cheese and
Yeah.
Culture. That's the book. That is on the history of cheese making. It's really good. I went a couple weeks ago to a Zoom lecture on the archaeology of
That was also
cheese
really good.
making. That was really good. And I went to some other Zoom academic thing, and one of the people running it had written a paper on cheese, which she has not yet published, but she sent me a copy as long as I didn't share it with anybody.
Oh, darn.
It's not published yet. But one of the cool things she had in there is that you know how some of the period monastic orders, they weren't supposed to talk, but when you are dining with a group of people, sometimes you have to find some way to say pass the salt or ale or whatever it is.
That's the sign language.
Right. So they had sign language. And the one for asking for the cheese was like this. So cheese is something you pray for. I like that. I like that.
So are there any like cheese directions, I guess, in period cookbooks? Or do they just use cheese?
There are they're more actually the instructions on how to make cheese that were written in period. You will find them more in agricultural manuals.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yes. Period cookbooks tend to use cheese as an ingredient. So
Yeah.
and they will sometimes just say cheese, and you have to figure out from the context what kind of cheese they want. The most common specific cheese is Parmesan. They say Parma cheese or cheese of Parma. It's like,
Right.
okay, use Parmesan, that's fine. But otherwise you have to really tell from the context most of the time whether you're grating the cheese. Sometimes they'll say green cheese, which means fresh cheese. But which fresh cheese, who knows?
I would guess that almost all cheese would be made on farms because no pasteurization. So cooks would not be making cheese. That'd be a completely separate thing. They're just buying it from the farmer, is my guess.
Most of the time, yeah. I mean, if you're dealing with a cookbook that's for a grand manor, as opposed to so it's more of a household manual, that you might find some cheese in there. I think, is it May or Markham? One of those that's a household manual. I think one of those has cheese in it. But otherwise, yes, it's in the agricultural books that you will find cheese instructions.
Le Viandier de
I
Taillevent.
have collected a whole bunch of them, and if you go to the Known World Cheesemakers group, and probably the West Kingdom one and the Lockhart one, people there will happily direct you to a variety of them.
Yeah, Le Viandier de Taillevent has got a cheese recipe in it. So it's not a matured cheese, it's a pressed, but it is a kind of, I guess you call it a green cheese. And it's a pressed, it's actually kind of the medieval equivalent of halloumi, and then it's a fried cheese. After you make it, you fry it. But yeah, that's in a recipe book. Yeah. A long, complicated story. But a lot of the cheese, those kind of cheeses, like Le Viandier, it's actually not a cultured cheese. It's a split, using a in that case verjuice to split the milk.
Using an acid to set it.
And then a cultured cheese.
And there's a 14th century Italian recipe that actually calls for rennet from kid or lamb specifically to make the fresh cheese with.
Where's that one found?
That's in the Anonimo Toscano.
And some of the cheese making suppliers, they will sell you rennet of various sorts. I mean, you can get veggie rennet, you can get cow rennet, you can get sheep and goat rennet. And someone's mentioned here in the chat that fig sap will curdle milk and make a soft cottage cheese. I have seen reports of people saying they have successfully done that. The fig trees in my neighborhood, I have not yet accosted them in that manner. I'm thinking of it. I tried using nettle to curdle my milk. I tried that a couple of times and I got it to work once. And all the other times since then, it has not worked.
I've been doing fig sap cheese fairly extensively over the last 5 years.
Mhm.
And I'm starting from twigs, basically twigs, and just sort of peel the bark to make them bleed.
Yeah.
And they're not coming out. Someone said it's soft cottage cheese. It's not the way they come out. They come out as hard curds, and if you press them, um, they make a fairly hard cheese. I don't mean hard like Parmesan, but hard like cheddar, that kind of level. And I haven't kept them very long. I think the longest I've kept any was about 6 weeks in the refrigerator because I don't have a curing spot. But they're different from a lot of the fresh cheeses that people are making, like paneer, in that they curdle at a slightly higher temperature. You can't let them sit at 110 and have them do anything. You have to heat them up to 120 to 130 and keep stirring. And then they'll start to separate and curdle just the way any rennet cheese does. And my presses are soup cans with lead weights piled in on top of the back end of the cutout lid. So, and I do have one regular cheese press, and that one also comes out with a fairly heavy texture.
Does the
Anyway.
fig sap make the cheese somewhat bitter the way thistle is supposed to?
I've had people say that, and what I found is if you salt it, it's not bitter. So, but it could be the method, it could be the fig tree, I don't know. I've done it with branches from, probably a dozen different trees at this point. And I've done them anywhere from late winter. I'm on the Oregon coast, so late winter is February, early February. Anywhere from then all the way through Christmas time. And actually, it seems to work better in the fall. People keep telling me, oh, you have to wait till the sap's running. And it's like, no. If you're using a twig, you just use it whenever you use it. So.
I wonder if we can grow fig trees.
Probably.
What's that?
Now I'm like, I wonder if we in Ontario, Canada, can grow fig trees.
There are cold hardy figs. I don't know how cold your coldest temperatures are.
So we're zone 5.
Ooh,
Okay. Yeah, we're zone 9.
Yeah.
put it in a pot and roll it into the garage for the winter.
Yeah.
The
Or
garage
under the porch at
freezes.
least.
I'm like probably in my office. Yeah. I think that's going to be a house plant.
They used to grow figs in Paris, and when it got cold, they would put mats on top of them in the Roman period. So I don't know how it lines up in terms of geography with Ontario.
Yeah. So unfortunately, because we're so landlocked, we get bitterly cold because we only have the Great Lakes. We don't have the ocean.
I don't think they're that cold hardy.
No, probably not. So, all right.
Now, is 16th century in period for the SCA?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
it is. Jen.
Does everybody know Charles Estienne's country house? La Ferme Rustique? I'm guessing no from the look.
No. There's a lot of the English country house manuals, and there's one
Okay,
Spanish
well-
one, but the French ones, no, I'm not aware of those.
Charles
Are they
Estienne,
only in French, or have they been translated?
well, that's the thing. He wrote in the 16th century, then his son-in-law upgraded it, and you never really know what's his son-in-law and what's him, all in the middle of the 16th century. And then in fact, I just copied the link. I guess I'll just go ahead and put it in chat.
Good.
They did an English translation called The Country House, Maison Rustique, or the Country Farm, actually, Country Farm. And it has a long section of making cheese.
Oh, lovely. That's an
Uh,
excellent resource. Thank you.
Great.
I mean, in general, somebody was talking about how this is all country stuff. His whole manual is on what you do in the country. And it tells you how to make bread. It tells you how to make wine, beer, just all the stuff you would do in the country per 16th century France, basically. But it's, as I say, this translation, it was so popular that by 1600, there was a translation into English, which I've just, because I don't know if anybody can see it, but I just put the link in.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jim. That's great. Kirill, I'm curious, is raw milk available down under? Kirill
Is what?
muted.
Sorry?
Is raw milk available to you down under, or is that one of the places where it's illegal?
You can buy raw milk, but it's supposed to be not for eating. So if you go to some health food shops, they sell it as for bathing and beauty purposes.
Oh, okay.
We are starting to get some raw milk cheeses made locally, though. So it is starting to get there, but
Oh,
it's
good.
very slow.
Good.
In New Zealand, there's a lot of caveats about it. So basically, you go in and you can buy this raw milk, you can eat it, but don't come back to us if you get sick from it. And there's a lot of hygiene requirements for the raw milk producers. So it becomes too administratively burdensome, and most don't bother. But I do get non-homogenized fresh milk delivered in glass bottles from a local farm. So almost as good. That lovely layer of thick cream at the top is wonderful.
Yeah. The reason the raw milk is so expensive here in California is the lawyers that the dairies have to keep on retainer, because so many people are just wackadoodle about raw milk. And it was the milk trains, which are way past our period, that are the reason that people are afraid of raw milk, because they mix all of the milks together. And if any one cow had any bad stuff going on there, it would contaminate the whole thing.
Yeah, they have to ditch the whole day's batch if even one of the tests come back negative. So
yeah.
One of my raw goat milk sources has a sign on it that just be warned. And when you if you write them a check, it's for goat feed, not for milk.
Right.
But it makes great cheese.
It does make really good.
Yep. Oh, maybe muted yourself there. And does everybody know why? At least for those of us in the US, perhaps, hopefully, Charlie, there in New Zealand, it's not the case. Why in the US sheep milk cheese costs, that US produced sheep milk cheese costs just as much as imported sheep milk cheese?
Scale.
Because
it's only small producers. Yeah.
Yeah, because the sheep raised in the US, there are very few dairy sheep raised in the US. Most of the breeds are wool and meat. And the Europeans who raise dairy sheep don't want to sell the genetic material, because, when you're that sort of livestock transfer, you just send the semen over, you don't send the actual animal. They don't want to, because, well, then that would cut into US people buying European sheep cheese. And there's
They disrespect my ability to buy a lot of cheese.
You have to specially design the milking parlors. The one sheep dairy that we used to have here, they had a connection to a company that built milking parlors, so they got a deal on having their custom made, because you make them for cows or you make them for goats, and sheep don't fit in the goat milking parlor, and they certainly are too small to go in a cow milking parlor. So, yeah. So
So
that's
we
why,
have little mobile milking units on like a little hand cart that go around for sheep and goat farms.
right.
Some
But
New
that's
Zealand
very
sheep
small scale.
cheeses is one of those. Yeah, yeah. And also the hygiene certificates are the same cost for all milk and cheese producers. So no matter if you're producing 10 sheep's worth of cheese or thousands of cows worth of cheese, you have to pay the same price to have your health audits done on your
And you
premises.
get so much more milk out of a cow than you do out of a sheep, even though sheep milk is so much richer.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like, for those of you who have not drunk sheep milk, if you were to take a glass of cow's milk and stick a cube of butter in it and drink it, that's what sheep milk's like. It's that rich. It's marvelous. Harden your arteries straight away, but you'll die happy.
So is it actually thicker than even like Guernsey or Jersey?
It's got a lot more fat in it.
Wow. Because I live on Jersey milk for the most part. And every time Bill accidentally grabs some of my milk out of the fridge, he just goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't drink milk at all. I'm allergic, but that's beside the point.
Yes, you're allergic to milk and live with a cheesemaker.
I do, yes.
How are you with camel's milk? Because camel's milk is fantastic.
I've never tried camel's milk, but I am allergic to all other mammals. Like I can't have that I've tried. So I can't have sheep or goat either. So I'm not optimistic on other mammals.
Yeah, there used, for a short while, there was a grocery store nearby, relatively nearby, that was selling powdered mare's milk and powdered camel milk. And I really thought about, they don't sell them anymore, and I missed my bet. I was gonna get some, and since it's powdered, I was gonna add it to cow or goat just for flavor, but I missed that boat.
Oh.
So Kiriel, can you get camel's milk?
Oh, I don't know. I've had camel's milk because when I was traveling overseas a number of times, and I love it. It's amazing milk. It's got this extraordinary mouthfeel. It's, you know, and but unlike normal milk, it gets a bit rich if you have quite good milk, and it gets quite rich, and you kind of feel that kind of richness when you drink it. Camel's milk has this gorgeous texture, which is just silky and delicious, but doesn't get over rich. You don't get that kind of same kind of, oh, that's a bit much kind of feeling in your tea that you can get from normal milk.
Are there still feral camels in Western Australia?
Oh yes, Australia has one of the biggest camel populations in the world. Yes, and they are a feral pest here, unfortunately.
Nobody rounds them up to milk them. Darn.
Yeah, milking camels they're pretty grumpy things at the best of times, and wild camels even more so. Yeah. I wanted to ask a question of the hive mind while I've got you, if you don't mind.
That's what we're here for.
So I'm about to run a class, and I'm kind of doing prep at the moment, on my 16th century cheesecake donuts, Spanish donuts. The recipe in it has both new cheese and green cheese. So I've been kind of puzzling out, trying to figure out what the difference between new cheese and green cheese is in this circumstance, and what Spanish cheeses would be, what cheeses in Spain would have been new cheese and green cheese. So, you know, for the purposes of my class, I use a mozzarella and a ricotta. But, you know, I don't know what, I'm hoping somebody out there might have a bit more knowledge on Spanish cheeses, because I've been looking around at Spanish cheeses, and of course you can get descriptions and you can get lists of cheeses, but you don't know which of the cheeses just by name is a green cheese and which of these cheeses is a new cheese. So that's my question.
And the donuts you're doing there from Nola, right?
That's right.
Okay, since he was in Naples, I would think that the mozzarella, particularly if you're getting a buffalo milk mozzarella, that is a good choice. Because he was in Naples. Were he actually still in Spain, I would say a sheep cheese, just because they were raising so much sheep for all of the wool. And I don't know how much, they had specified breeds, sheep, of meat and wool and milk, that the animals were still more multi-purpose, is my impression. I'm not sure about that, but that would be my guess. So since he's in Naples, I would think more the Italian choices you have made strike me as reasonable.
Anyone else
That's my guess.
views?
I cheated. I Googled it.
Mhm.
According to
You
Google,
probably found my
a
recipe.
green cheese is a fresh cheese that is not thoroughly dried or aged, which is white in color and usually round in shape. A new cheese, according to them, is unripened cheese made with cow milk left open to ripen, and it'll develop a small, soft, bloomy rind like brie or Cambry.
Oh. Is that's a modern description, or it's a description?
That
of
is a
many-
modern description.
Okay.
So are the two cheeses types treated differently in recipes? You use this cheese and this is what you do to it. Are there different treatments for it?
Not in this recipe. This recipe is grind them together. So
Oh.
yeah, but there definitely are differences, and in other, they are. It's rare. This is the first recipe I've come across which had both new cheese and green cheese in it, in the same
Yeah, so
recipe.
Two different kinds of fresh, which is what you're doing, seems
That's right. Well,
makes
one's kind of fresh and one's kind of new.
I would, in my own brain, it sort of translates like a fresh cheese and a young cheese.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the mozzarella, because it's
Yeah.
not. It is a formed cheese, but it's not a matured.
It hasn't hung out in the cheese cave for 6 weeks.
right.
That's it. Exactly. So
I think you've made some good choices in your substitutions or your
Thank you.
picks.
thank you.
While I'm making the cheese cave, I know what we use for a cheese cave. What do other people use for their cheese caves?
Mascarpone.
Where do you store your cheeses? If you age cheese, where do you store them?
Yeah. How do you guys age your cheeses?
Oh,
Do you wax them? Do you vacuum seal them? Do you shove them in the root cellar? Do you hope for the best on the counter?
I live in Texas, so I don't have a root cellar. I have a lot of rocks down there.
That's fair.
I do a refrigerator and I wax seal them.
We have a root cellar, but it gets both too cold and too warm.
So we put a heater in the winter, and we're looking at air conditioning it in the summer to keep it around 10 to 15 Celsius. So cheese temperature, whatever that works out to Fahrenheit.
Oh,
I guess 40-ish.
Wanta has brought visual aids.
Yes, I keep mine in plastic boxes. The plastic box has a lid. It comes in two parts, so that when it is dried enough, I put it back together. But right now, when the cheese is still a little wet and I don't want it to get wetter, I put a cloth over it and just use the rim to hold it down. And there's a mesh at the bottom of the box. The current cheese experiment is coating cheeses and things. I have one covered in nettles, one in cumin, and one in fennel pollen. But that's, yeah. The nettle one, the nettle one's kind of pretty.
Yes.
It's all green leafy.
Then do you
That
just
was
at room temperature?
Yeah, that's what I
yes,
was going to ask.
yes, but I live in San Francisco.
So what's San Francisco room temperature?
60s.
Okay. So
And
like,
you know, it's San Francisco. It's
Yeah,
it's not terribly dry. It's
Right.
not really, really humid, but you know, we get fog. So, and when I do put them away, I'll either stick them in the fridge, or I put them downstairs in the oubliette. Which it's not a root cellar, but it's the part of the basement that's halfway in the hillside, so the
Right.
temperature and humidity are fairly constant, and it is where my downstairs neighbor stores his sausage. We have the best tasting earthquake kit on the block.
apparently Ken has also brought down cheese to,
He waxed.
yes.
Evelyn, who is my cheesemaking guru, she has told me that she has not found evidence in period for cheeses being waxed, which is why I have not waxed them.
I did see it in the one cheese book that was actually mentioned. There was a reference to they used to I think it was in paprika they used to coat them something with a red color to protect them, and then when they moved to waxing, they just colored the wax red to duplicate that. But the waxing was for long distance transport. That's
Yeah,
I
but
do recall that.
putting paprika on them obviously would be a post-period thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There was something they put on that was red, I think, but that might have been also post period.
In France, they have these
And her-
wonderful cheeses called a marque de champagne, and when they or a tome de champagne sometimes, or tome au marque, and basically once you've got your champagne grapes and you press the grapes and they're all juiced out, and then you wrap the cheese in the grapes that were the remaining leftover grapes that were used for making the champagne, and that's what you wrap your cheese in, is these grapes, and it makes this wonderful kind of winey.
Oh yes, that's how you get purple
taste.
cheese.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, as you
I-
soak it in
That's fun
wine.
to
I've
do.
done that. That
I have
one's fun.
too.
Mm.
And there's
With
also the
this
other
wine.
and I've wrapped this one in nettle leaves. You can wrap them in fig leaves, chestnut leaves,
Mhm.
various other things, grape leaves.
When I have a house, I have a little wine cooler refrigerator
Oh, yeah, okay.
that I use, and I get a cigar humidor thing that measures temperature and humidity, so I can keep track of that. And then I'll put things in boxes within that. And
Yeah, a lot of people use the wine fridge sort of thing. And Maeve is up in the Pacific Northwest where it is quite damp, and she gets that. But also Professor Ken Albala, who lives in Stockton where it's hotter than Hades, puts
Yeah.
his cheese in a wine cooler just the same. So it's a good thing regardless of where you may be, if
Yes.
you have space for one. And
And you can't afford a cheese fridge. Yes.
well, and because wine fridges tend to be small, or if you at the end of the school year, local college, go find somebody who's getting rid of their dorm fridge and use that.
the goat farm where I get a lot of my raw milk, they have a old refrigerator, right? And that's their cheese cave. And we're talking ancient, not quite the ice box, but not too far from that.
Mm-hmm.
And she makes some really good cheeses.
Did anybody already mention Platina as a source for cheese?
Yeah, there's cheese making in there.
I'm sorry, you referring?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
people have mentioned Platina.
I know about that one.
It
Everybody else know about that one, right?
Didn't, so thank you for saying it.
Yes.
Well, no, because I actually have a link here, but I don't want to pass it on. If
Please do
people-
pass
Oh,
it
no.
on.
Yeah, more links are better. More information. Information's Great.
What I want to point out is that the French so-called translation of Platina is sometimes just total addition. So I don't know if this is the Italian Platina or if it's the French addition to it. But I just put that. And then the other question was, going back to the Romans, do people know Columa's version, Columella?
I don't.
Yeah,
That-
Nothing.
Oh,
So anything you tell me is a feature, and I'm here to represent for all the other shy newbies who are unwilling to admit to their ignorance.
oh, good. I admire people who admit to
Yeah,
their-
Columella was mentioned earlier when we were talking about figs, but yes, Columella,
Okay, but if you have a link, toss it in so that we can.
yeah.
Okay, so that's in. I looked at Vero and Cato too, but they have very general kind of instructions.
Yeah.
But
Cato's-
Columella is
yeah.
pretty detailed. So.
Wonderful, thank you.
Blessed are the cheesemakers.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I even like your cheesemakers. You guys are fun.
Now, I actually tried making cheese way back in the 70s in Boston, but just in a very improvisational way. And a friend of mine who had very cheerfully said, "Oh, you can make your own cheese. It's really healthy." And then I gave him this little thing of cheese I'd made, and he almost spit it out. He said, "Is this something you made yourself?" And one of the reasons I stopped was I did research on what you can get from bad milk, and it's pretty terrifying, some of the stuff that does go into bad milk. I mean, if it goes wrong, it can really, really go wrong. So that is.
But when it goes right, all those.
Oh,
lovely
yes.
cultures
Well, I
and
lived in
creams
France for
and
7 years, so I've tasted the proper result. But yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is you don't necessarily need just raw milk to be concerned about the effect. You can buy perfectly commercial milk and still end up with some risks if you're not careful.
Yeah, but there's the, yes, you're right. You can get in serious trouble. But white mold generally is good. You've got good microbes, because there's good microbes and there's bad microbes. Good microbes make good cheese, bad microbes make a trip to the doctor. White mold is good. Other colors, you follow your nose. That's the purpose of your nose, is to tell you what is food and what is not food. If it doesn't smell like food, don't eat it. If the mold is black,
Oh,
don't eat it.
except-
Pink is
except for
also real bad.
I just remember reading about one microbe that it was something like if you put a teaspoonful into a huge amount of water, you could kill a city. That may have been exaggerated at the time, but it's made me way more careful about making cheese.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, clean everything. When you're making cheese, first step is everything is clean.
Yeah.
As would
Before
be,
Second,
Yeah.
But there are
everything is
so
more
many
clean.
wonderful molds out there. I mean, because I had the fortune of living in Switzerland for almost 10 years, and I'd nip across to France for my grocery shopping, and the cheeses and the molds there are truly frightening. There are orange ones, there are cheeses that look like a brain, there are ones where you've got hairs that stand half an inch high, and the whole thing is just covered in this really fine hair all over it, and you're just going to go, okay. And most of them are made with raw milk, and you just have to go, okay, I will have faith.
you're Swiss, so I will trust you. If you were American,
and enjoy. Scrape
Now,
off the hair and eat it.
I presume everybody knows the anecdote about Charlemagne that is mischaracterized as talking about blue cheese.
Yes. Yes.
And does everybody know that it's actually about a white rind cheese?
I don't. What's the thingy?
Well, it's wrong on a number of counts. Okay, so Toussaint Sama in her History of Food tells a version of it, which is already a corrupted version of Le Grand Dossier's mistranslation of Nutker the Stammerer's anecdote, which is probably apocryphal anyway. But it comes down to Charlemagne showing up on a fast day and being given a cheese and cutting off what they call the rust in the Latin, basically the surface. And then the bishop says, well, you're cutting off the best part. And Charlemagne agrees and ends up asking to have this cheese sent to him. Now, there's a few things wrong with it. One, that Charlemagne, this is 100 years after Charlemagne, and he probably didn't keep a weekly fast. it certainly wasn't about blue cheese, which is, a lot of people tell you Charlemagne and Roquefort because they interpret it, because Le Grand Dossier, the 18th century author, characterized it as being about blue cheese, which is an error that's been, oh, clean. And then Toussaint Sama went on to credit it to a particular geographical region, which is utterly unjustified. There's not the slightest hint of where he was actually doing this. But as it is, it's sort of like George Washington and the cherry tree. It's not really a very serious anecdote about Charlemagne. But it does show that Notker the Stammerer knew about a white wine cheese. So it's that's worthwhile for that. And given that Brie was the first cheese to be named really in France in the Middle Ages, not in the Roman
There's
time,
a tasty white rind for you.
and it was the only named cheese for a long time that people actually sought out. By the way, if you've never had Brie in Brie, which I've done, it's well worth the trip if you're in Paris, like 50 minutes out of Paris. The town's got some cute stuff, and the cheese, what can I say? So,
And cheese is always a good reason to go on a trip, go travel, eat
If
the
you're ever
yummy
near
stuff.
us, which is southwestern Ontario, Canada, we one of the neighboring counties has an entire cheese trail where you go to all different dairies and they have like a self-guided cheese tour.
well,
Yeah, we have a cheese trail near here too, and I have done cheese tours.
Which was
Awesome.
even fun for someone who couldn't eat any of the cheese. So that is high praise.
certainly safer than the wine trails we have up above Ojai.
We've done a few of the wine tours too. I can drink those.
Mm.
As Talina posted, we have now about 10 minutes left in class. So-
Before we go to Kiriel's marvelous class with the cheesy Spanish donuts.
That's
Or
where I'm
Jim's
going.
lecture.
Yes, there's another talk, but we don't have to talk about that one. Go to the donuts. Go.
So what
Yeah,
cheese?
one of the things that we brought home from Spain, we brought some cheese home. There was in Toledo, across the street from our hotel, is this place called the Museo de Manchego. And actually it's a cheese and wine shop, but in the back they had exhibits on making the Manchego cheese. And I even got one of the rope molds from making Manchego cheese. I have not used it yet, but
That's exciting.
yeah, here, more show and tell.
Now we know what Juana
They have a lot of those things, don't they? They have the Museo de Jamón and the Museo de Manchego, and they're actually shops, but they're kind of museums at the same time.
It's a cincho porquizo.
Ooh, cute.
Oh, cool.
A belt
Yes,
for
and-
cheese.
Yes, and you wrap it around and then tighten it up as the cheese drains.
Oh,
But that's why Manchego cheese, traditional Manchego cheese, has this patterning. You now buy plastic molds with the pattern in it. But traditionally, this is what they used. And that was the one thing I wanted to find when we were in Spain, but expected I wouldn't. And haha, was surprised.
you win.
Yes, there's a shop in Madrid. Mostly they sell shoes, but they also sell all kinds of things made out of esparto, including a cincho porqueso.
So what else is everybody else excited to try next in their cheese making endeavors?
I'm going to try and make churro
Oh,
because I've been
yay.
playing with the Transylvanian cookbook.
What's that?
From what I have read, it is a Hungarian cheese product. It's kind of similar to a fresh farmer's cheese or ricotta kind of, or possibly quark. Everything, I'm getting sort of mixed messages about what I'm reading in terms of the end texture,
Okay,
and not having ever traveled to Hungary,
fair.
I get to fake it.
Fair enough.
So you pick one of the recipes that's particularly cheesy and do it multiple times with the different possibilities.
Yep, I can
And
get
see
a
which one
whole
do you like?
gallon of Guernsey milk up the road, so I'm gonna do 3 little batches.
Nice.
We'll see what happens.
Anybody else got grand cheese plans?
as soon as my potter friend makes me a couple of those little cheese sieves that from the talk the other day
The
that
Neolithic.
Juana was on,
Oh, yes.
The Polish
Yes.
ones.
I'm gonna play with those
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
because I can build a fire and heat milk.
Yep.
I don't really have much of a kitchen at the moment, so
But you can
The
build a
one
fire
where you
and
put
heat
it, the one where you put it into the pot
In,
and
yeah.
ladle out. Yeah,
Yeah.
That was so fascinating.
That sounded
Yes.
really
Was.
interesting.
that was really cool.
and those things are not very big. I mean, if you look at the diagram and
Yes.
look at the measurements closely, they're this big.
Yeah.
I'm
So
curious, have people spent much on the difference between a May and a fall cheese?
I'm sorry, between which?
A
Uh,
May and a fall cheese, depending on it, because the consistency of the milk
Yeah.
varies throughout the season.
so
Yeah.
in
Not at
one of the few
Which is why
distinctions-
the Vacheron, for example, is only made in the fall.
So
right.
one of the few distinctions you see in early medieval cheeses is a May cheese, which is actually used for kind of torture at one point. And then in the later, I think in Taiwan, but certainly in some of the later cookbooks, you see a fromage de gain, which I believe is a fall cheese. And you also see a spring cheese. So there's a difference in how fresh the milk is and all that. But apparently they still make spring cheeses. I mean, I think I bought one
Oh,
at
yeah.
Trader Joe's a while back. So, but this is not something you folks have factored in, I guess, in making cheese.
Oh yeah, that's very, very French, because the French, you know, they're particular about what, because it's what it changed. The diet of the cow changes what the milk is like, and in spring the cows are eating some spring grasses and spring flowers and stuff like that. So their diet is quite different, and the quality of the milk is quite different. And in the autumn, and in winter they're eating, you know, straw and hay, and so sometimes they'll actually mix autumn milk with spring milk, or winter milk with spring milk, so that, you know, because they've got different amounts of fat in the milk and stuff like that. It's all much more exciting. In Australia, I don't think we've got any cheesemakers who do anything like that. You know, field specific,
I
diet
thought the
specific.
spring cheese was a
time.
fresh cheese and that a fall cheese would somehow be older, but the idea of the difference in the milk is kind of interesting. And so, you know, my cheese making has never reached that point. So
Well, we have 5 minutes left before the next class joins us.
But the next class is Carrie Olson.
There
She's
you go.
already here.
I can definitely say when I was making cheese commercially that we definitely saw changes in the milk over the whole lactation cycle.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
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 Well, that's useful to know. Yeah, because I think I was envisioning it taking a whole different route. So that's good. And has anybody ever looked at Pliny's chapter on cheese, where he talks about all the cheeses which were popular from France in Rome?
Me, I'm a 16th century gal.
Oh yeah.
You know.
No, it's interesting because I think some think that one of his cheeses might have been a blue cheese, although people speculate outrageous about that. But it's also interesting because he talks about several cheeses which were very appreciated in Rome, and then and they were from France. And then you get to the early medieval period and nobody's talking about regional cheeses at all anymore. So
Except for Parmigiano.
well, that's later. You know, I'm
Yeah.
talking about early medieval
Oh.
France.
So the paper I got the other day from the academic who hasn't published it yet, hers was on very early cheese making and comparing cheeses in what we now know as England to Ireland. That they had very different cheese making traditions. And let's see, her paper. Yeah, it's early medieval cheese, British Isles early medieval cheese.
Oh, that's
You know where she's going to publish it?
I do not.
So that's not a link you can put yet. Then.
No, that's right. The lady's name, it's Leslie Lockett from the Ohio State University.
Oh,
Just
okay.
if you want to just like keep an eye out for her on academia or other places that academics.
Yeah, if you could type that into the chat,
Yeah,
check it out.
let's.
I'm gonna have to cut out shortly. So,
Perfect.
thanks.
I have to scamper. Thanks, everyone.
No problem. I think this is about when I'm going to cut the recording off.
Thank you. See you later.